everybody. Welcome to the Kim McVicker podcast. Today, my guest is...
It's me, Gary Cannon, and I'm a stand-up comic here in LA. Well, I've been here for a long, long time, and I actually have a really cool job. I do audience warm-up for a bunch of TV shows here in LA, and currently I'm working as the audience warm-up for the Jennifer Hudson Show, which is a great gig.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yes.
And you glitched out on the word, your last name, so I'm going to say it, Gary Cannon,
Yes.
just so that everyone hears it clearly. That's amazing. How did you get into warm-up gigs?
Well, it's crazy because years and years ago, before I even lived in LA, I was living in San Francisco doing stand-up, and I remember flying down to LA to see a taping of The Tonight Show. It was with Jay Leno, and it was crazy because as I was waiting in line to go see The Tonight Show, which was over at the old NBC building, which is the iconic building where Leno taped Days of Our Lives, all those other crazy shows, that you used to wait in a big line off of Alameda, and that was how you got in. And as we're waiting in line, somebody comes out and they said, "Hey, Howie Mandel is taping a daytime talk show right now, and we need people to sit in the audience for it. If you guys come in, don't worry, you won't lose your place in line for the Tonight Show, but we would love it if you guys came in and you were sitting in our audience for Howie Mandel." And I went in, and they had this guy that just came out and was like making jokes and setting up who was on the show and introducing Howie. It's like, this is pretty awesome. Like, I thought that was a very cool thing to see that. And I later found out that the guy who did that was a guy named Phil Steller, who I became friends with later in life. But the guy then did his warm up, went away, and then the show went on. And then I went into the Tonight Show. They also had a guy. And I was like, wow, this is a pretty cool thing, whatever this is. I don't know what this job is or what it means or the job title. And then when I first moved to LA, I was like, I'd like to kind of re-explore what that was. So I had a friend that worked at the Late Late Show with then host Craig Kilborn. So I would go and just start hanging out at that show and just kind of seeing what the warm-up did. And they had a couple of different guys doing it at the time, a guy named Roger, and then another guy whose name slips my mind. But I remember they had a main guy who did most of the shows, but he couldn't do 2 days a week because he was doing sitcoms, which at the time paid way more money than a late night talk show. So he would skip out, say like Tuesdays and Fridays, and they had another guy that came in, and they didn't like the other guy. And I was there at the right place, right time. And they said, "Hey, we want to audition a few people that we think might be a good fit for Roger," who was the main guy, as a backup to him. I auditioned, me and a couple of other guys.
What do you do in an audition for a
real
warm-up
show.
person?
They give you a real show.
So the audition is go.
The audition is go. It's not as though it's like, "Hey, send us a tape of you doing crowd work," or "Send us a tape of you doing stand-up." It's like, "Hey, we're going to give you an actual show for you to do, and let's see how this flies." And Kim,
And if anyone out there doesn't know what this is, so like if you see a TV show and it says in front of a live audience, before the show is taped, somebody comes out and talks to the audience. And I would say your job is to make sure that everyone's in a good mood.
Yes. It's really the job of a warm-up person is 8 different things. I mean, you're getting them excited. You're explaining what's about to happen. You're telling them who's on the show. You're also kind of playing traffic cop where you're making sure that people behave during the show. I know that sounds silly, but sometimes you get people who want to just screw around, and
of course, or they see their famous person and they want to talk to them, but
they want to yell something, or they want to try to get a joke or a script to the producers. You're also
that happens. Somebody tries to.
Oh yeah. Especially on sitcoms where somebody is in college or they've been in LA for a long time, and they'll go to the rail and try to go down. Like it's a very complicated thing, but they try to get through.
Has anyone ever gotten their script to somebody that way?
No, right? I doubt it.
So college kids, anybody who wants to be a writer, if you're listening, don't do it then.
It's kind of insane, but basically they let me do a real show, and I was so nervous. And listen, it was with Craig Kilborn, and he was one of 4, I think. Yeah, he was one of 4 like late night guys at the time. It was like Letterman, Kilborn, and then it was whoever was on at 11:30 on NBC, and then whoever was 12:30, maybe it was like Conan. So, I mean, that was a big deal. I mean, that was a high profile show that I was getting a chance to.
Yeah, I can't believe they were just like, go.
So it was me and 3 other people that did it. And I just remember I really bonded with Roger, who was the current warm-up guy on that show. and he kind of helped make the decision who he thought was a good fit for that show. He really was instrumental in helping me get that job. And so he met with the producers. He said, I think Gary's a great fit for this show. And then I just got thrown to the wolves. But the crazy thing about that show, Kim, looking back on that show, which was 20 years ago, most shows today, you do 10 minutes up front, host comes out, the show starts. It's very regimented, starts on time. They don't mess around. Let's go. But that show, because it was so different and Craig was hosting, you never knew when you were starting. They would just tell you to get going, and you could be doing warm up for 10 minutes or 30.
Oh, that's such a difference.
It's such a difference because, as you know, even doing stand up and maybe the person who's on after you isn't there and they tell you to go long, you don't know how long to go. You don't know where to front load the jokes, where to kind of level things out. It was one of those things. Do I go strong for 10 minutes and maybe now have to stretch and then I don't have anything from there forward? It was a weird thing, but it really gave me the legs and the strength to do longer time when I needed to. Because then when you get to shows like Conan or Jennifer Hudson and they say 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes, if not less. So it was a great stepping stone for it being my first gig. So it was great. I mean, but that was a show that had a mix of people. It had older tourists that were there, but it also had like young college UCLA baseball people there that were there to just see the show, but also cause a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, how do you decide what you're going to say to people? Because you do that, but then you also host a lot of comedy shows around town, like at the Improv, the store, at Ice House. I see you everywhere. And do you do the same thing for both, kind of, or very different?
Well, initially setting up the ground rules, what they're going to see, those kind of silly front jokes, who came from where, this is what we're doing, who wants free stuff. Just silly.
Well, I guess in a comedy show you can't throw out candy.
Correct. Or
I mean, you could, but like,
or late show T-shirts. So it's just about setting up the tone of what they're going to see and getting kind of the ground rules out of the way. Hey, once the show starts, here's what we need. We want all this great energy for Craig and all of our guests. Bam, bam, bam. But then it just kind of shifts a little bit. I mean, listen, there were so many shows where the crowd was good and yet the monologue was bad. And so, listen, you can tell the audience that we need your love and energy all day long. But if the host comes out and the monologue is bad, who's that on? Is that on me or is that on the writers backstage? I mean,
because you want the audience to be kind of honest too.
Well, it was also weird too, because just to kind of forward ahead, when I started working at Conan, Jimmy Pardo, who was the warm-up at the time, said to me, hey, you will go back to Conan after you do the warm-up and you will let him know what you think of the audience.
Okay.
And so if you thought it was good, and let's say he comes out and doesn't do well, I don't want that on me, right? And then if you go the other way and you say they're not good, is that mentally going to get in his head that they're not a great crowd? Fortunately, I didn't have to do that. He didn't want that when I started. But I'll never forget when I was doing the Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, who took over for Kilborn. I remember it was one of the few times I ever got scolded pretty badly during a warm-up session, where he pulled me down literally after the monologue, pulled me off stage in like this little cubby hole and yelled at me for the audience being bad. And it shakes you up and you're like, well, wait a minute. Do you not take any accountability for this being a bad monologue? I mean, it wasn't good.
Also, it's okay if the audience is bad, right? Like I get it. You don't want to, it's film and TV, all of those things, but like, I don't know. They're all fans. They should be there for fun.
It's an ego thing. I think they really believe that the audience should be hanging on their every word. I think the guy that did Jay Leno, a guy named Don Reed, never got scolded or in trouble for the audience being bad, even if they were, because Jay was a comic. Jay understood. Sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it won't. So, but the Kilborn thing was great. But in a way, Craig wasn't a comic either, because Craig was just kind of a sports guy and he would come out, just do maybe 4 or 5 jokes, jump to the guest. But that was a hard first show to do, but it gave me the confidence then to go on to Ferguson. And then The very first show that I did that was my own, that was a full-time gig that I didn't back up anybody, was Carson Daly, and he had a late night show years ago where I don't know if you remember, he was on at like
I think I watched that
1:35.
show. Yeah,
He
yeah,
was on
yeah.
1:35 in the morning, and that was an interesting show because it was an all paid audience mostly. And for those who don't know, some shows that can't fill seats, I mean, there's a lot of them. They have to
Yeah.
pay people, whether it's a pilot or a new show, they have to pay people.
Even talk shows that are popular have paid audiences.
Yeah, you see it a lot, and especially those months like January, February, where there's not a big tourist town of people in here wanting to see the show. It can be difficult. I mean, listen, even at Conan, there were days that we couldn't fill the audience. You're like, this is Conan. So you can only imagine at Carson Daly when, he was so nice and everybody was so nice, but there are days where we had 50, 60 people in a room that holds 120.
Is it easier if it's a paid audience because they like want to be up there or no?
No, because paid audiences feel above it, that they shouldn't be there.
Why?
They're also making $20 a day.
They're not making that much, but still, you chose to go.
Listen, I agree with you, and there are some warm-ups who will literally go and confront the audience and say, guys, you are being paid to be here. I need you to be here for the show and give us all that you can. And, it's crazy too, Kim. The other thing is when you have a group of paid people, like let's say a group from UCLA comes to a show or a group from like a church comes to your show, there's always a coordinator there. So if you go up to the coordinator and you say, hey, your group is bad and you guys aren't bringing it, the coordinator will then go around and start talking to people because they know
they're not going to get their money
again. They're not going to get their money, and they will be, Kim, I remember a time working at Carson Daly where there was an audience coordinator out in front of the studio paying the people cash after they had attended the show. And somebody must have known that this guy was out there with a boatload of money because I remember the guy got robbed. Somebody came and grabbed this stack of cash and started running down the street. Now you see all these paid audience members that know they can't get their dinner at Arco tonight.
Right.
And they start chasing after this guy and they grab the money back because they know they're not going to get paid tonight.
That's amazing. That is absolutely. I do know that like when people get out of prison, one of the first things they tell them to do is to get a job in Hollywood.
That's
like
funny.
because it's free food and money. So like, I mean, I don't think paid audience get food, right? Typically, unless it's forever.
A sitcom. If it's a sitcom, they will, and it's like a slice of pizza. It's funny. A buddy of mine that does warm up in New York, a guy named Ryan Reese, he put together a documentary that they're shopping around right now, and it's called Before We Get Started. And it's basically about warm-ups. And it's a very cool, intricate look into the world of warm-up and what we do and what we deal with. And it's just a great perspective of going from doing like the Tonight Show to then taking a gig on a Saturday morning, doing warm-up for an infomercial, which is the dregs of society. It's crazy. But
yeah, what's the hardest thing to warm up besides a funeral?
It's probably,
you know what? If I ever die, which I'm never going to die. I would like a warm up at my funeral, please.
Well, I think for me, a pilot, the very first episode of anything, because there's so many people with their hands in it. They don't know what they want to do. The audience has no clue what the show is. So they're there for a long time because, again, listen.
Oh, it takes longer because nothing's been worked out yet.
Nothing's been worked out. It's never a good sign when they say that they're going to start filming at 11 and half the people aren't even there yet. They're still working on the set design. They're figuring out the pillow configurations on the couch. Like, there's so much to it where you're like, oh, this is not a good look. I mean, there's so much craziness to it. I mean, I'll never forget, I did a pilot years ago, and I remember I was not going to do it, and it was 5 women that were doing this pilot, kind of very similar to The View or The Talk or anything. And I did the first half of the morning, no complaints, everything was great. And then I'd heard during lunch that there was some issues with the host. They weren't getting along. The chemistry was off. So just out of the blue, some woman comes up to me and just starts yelling at me that the audience is bad. Because I think they look at it like, if we can get the audience on board, the host will feed off of this energy, and then we're going to sell this show and make millions, which is total nonsense.
It sounds like higher ups just trying to find somebody to blame to get their aggression off of them.
That's exactly, because I remember this woman came up to me after lunch and said, "This audience is dead. We need to get them better." And I said, "I got to be honest with you." I said, "How long have they been dead for?" And she said, "Since this morning." And I said, "I've been in this business a long time. If they were bad this morning, somebody would have said something this morning." And she said, "Well, I'm telling you right now." And her and I started getting into a pissing contest. And she's like, "We want this audience to be like Ellen." And I said, "Well, there's a big problem.
Then someone's got to dance.
We don't have Ellen, and we don't have the prizes and all this stuff." And I remember she walked away from me, and I called the guy that hired me, and he came over, and I said, "If this woman comes over one more time, I will leave." And he said, "Nobody will bother you." And it is that kind of thing where I needed the money, but I think when you don't let people talk to you that way, then you're going to win, because so many of these entry level producers think that they're going to come up to you and talk that way to help build up their segment. And then it's not happening. I'm just not going to listen to it. And the best feeling that you can ever have is be like, "Hey, I'm going to leave. It's okay. I'm just going to walk away." And then they're screwed because they have nobody to finish out the day with them. So more than likely they'll let you do your thing. But it was
when you do stand up, like when you host stand up shows, what is your trick? What's the difference for you?
With doing, you mean like just in terms of crowd work?
Yeah.
I don't like, listen,
you're so fast, like so fast. Is it because you've done this for years?
Yeah, I think so. I think I think it's also because I don't want to hear either anybody heckling, or I don't want to hear the silence. So I figure if I don't stop talking, then
because you do like 50 jokes in 5 minutes. Like, well, it's crazy how fast you're like, blah, 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 blah.
And it's like really it's kind of the same jokes, but just again, I always try to do that thing where if people understand the stand-up of it, I'm definitely making fun of the crowd. But if you analyze it, it's me making fun of myself.
Of course, so, it should always be that way. I don't like it when people are mean to the audience ever.
No, and people can definitely, I hope, see it, that it just like it's a total goof.
No, you're very fun. You've never crossed the line.
So I think, but again, with some shows that I work on, whether it's a daytime talk show or a late night show, those warm-ups vary. Because when I'm at Conan, or when I did Conan, I can be a little dirty. You can push the line a little bit. When I'm at a daytime talk show, it's got to be a little cleaner. You can't push it over because the people, that's not the demographic for it. But, the difference between, like, the reason I love Jennifer so much is because not only is she great, but, like, it's not a comedy show. So you're not having so much pressure to make sure that that audience is laughing before the show starts. It's more of a feel-good show. So you want them feeling good before the show starts taping. That's your job. That's your objective. And making sure everybody has fun. Where Conan, it's like, yeah, they better be laughing and in a good mood before Conan gets out here. That's the bottom line. And so that can be tricky.
You also open for, or at least I saw you open for, a bunch of stand-up tapings. When you do that, what's the line there? Because you can't do too much in case somebody does it, right?
Yes.
Because if it's a taping, you don't want to take a premise that someone's going to do.
Right.
Or what?
So,
I don't know.
Kim, that's a combination of both. That's really kind of making them feel good, setting up the ground rules, and I remember doing this at Conan. Whenever somebody was on the show doing stand-up, I would say, "Hey, their family is in the audience right now. I'm not going to point them out, even though they weren't. They were backstage." Mm-hmm. I would say their family's here. We really, really want this to go well for them. This is their TV debut, whether it was or not. But again, you want them to just have a great moment for those 5 minutes. And I did that when I did all those shows. And in fact, the one that you were on, like, "Hey guys, this is such a big deal. This is their first special." Maybe it wasn't, they could have shot this anywhere, but they chose this obscure theater in North Hollywood at 4 p.m. on a Thursday. But yeah, that's the idea. It just really.
But I've seen you even do it for like 8 people. Like, what's the difference between that too? Because that's got to be, when there's a full audience of like 100 people, it's got to be so much easier than 8 people.
When it's 8 people, you feel bad for the comic that's doing it, because you think of, okay, well, why couldn't we get more people? Could they not get more friends out? What was the situation? But I also understand it's at 4 o'clock on a Thursday.
For sure.
That was the only time that was available. So I think you really kind of, it's kind of this inside thing of like, hey guys, it's us against them. I know there's only 8 of us here. I know there's only 10 of us here, but we really want this to go well, because you assume if it's 8 people, they definitely care enough about the person
to be
that they're
there.
going to elicit more of a response than maybe 100 people that figure, because I see this a lot too, where if there's more people, sometimes people can fade into the crowd and not have to do much. I mean, listen, Kim, if you go to a show, like I remember doing Dancing with the Stars, the VIPs are the worst people in the audience.
I believe
they don't have to
so
clap.
much.
They can be on their phone. They don't care. And the real fans are up in the balcony. And that's where you're getting the most energy from. But how can you go up to somebody who's a big name and be like, guys, you got to put your phone down. You got to be more into this. But I know it sounds crazy, but like sometimes 8 people will definitely pull more than a bigger crowd, because they know that they're vested. Like everybody is being watched. They're being looked at. So that's the difference of them. Like, okay, we got to focus and do this.
Their opinion matters more.
100%. Yeah. But all those shows, I mean, I've done The Masked Singer. That show is just a lot of work from start to finish, because that show isn't a comedy or a daytime talk show. It's a reality show where they want 500 people that have been standing all show to just be going crazy.
They have to stand. Ugh.
Yeah, stand the whole time. And you got to remember, they're standing outside before they come in. It's a long day. I mean, it really, and that's a combination of paid audience members, fans. It's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of people. And I see it where, we'll get 100 of the people going nuts, and then I'll look in the back sections and people are on the floor, sitting down, like not giving us what we need. And, again, how much can you do the warm up and then start going around to individuals? Hey guys, I need you to stand. And you would just burn out.
And like, what do you do? Okay, so let's say it's an audience of no one's being paid, genuine fans, right?
Genuine fans.
Different. And then they don't want to participate. You know what I mean? Like they're sitting, they're doing whatever. What do you do with that? Do you kick them out?
No, I think that's rare. Like I can only assume, and I knew this when my buddy did warm up on Ellen, it was a real rabid fan base.
Right.
They were there to see her. They were there to see the guests. Sometimes there was a giveaway. So there was never an issue with the audience not being into it. Although sometimes they wouldn't be as good as some of the other audiences. I mean, that's what my buddy would tell me, was that some rarely, maybe once a month, they just weren't in synergy together. They weren't pulling it together. But, if that number is once a month, that's not a bad number. I assume that the guy that does Fallon, Jimmy Fallon, doesn't have a bad crowd.
Right.
Most people are ready to go. So, I mean, for the most part, I mean, listen, I mean, at Jennifer Hudson, we usually get pretty good crowds. I mean, they're really good. They're fans of hers. They come to see her. And that's why it's so great, because when you walk in, they're just excited. And
would you ever have your own talk show with your own opener?
Would I want
warm up act? Yeah. Would that be cool?
It. Yeah.
What would you tell the warm up person? Or would you want to warm up your own audience?
I think here's what I would say. I think a comic doing their own warm up is not good, because I remember,
I've seen that. I know people do that.
I remember I knew a couple comics that came out before the show and just said, hey guys, like, listen, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I always think that you need somebody who's different. I also think too, whenever I see a comic hiring just a comic buddy to do warm up, it's not good, because they can go out there and do stand up, but they don't know the beats of like, hey, set the ground rules very quickly, just how important this is. Do that. And I know it sounds silly, but like it really is a big deal to have them do that and like let them know, here's what we're doing. Which again, in that movie that my buddy did, it's so great, like on how he focuses on all that stuff. But I think you got to have somebody different, because it just separates you from them. I'm not going to go back. Like, again, these shows, they have the money to budget for a warm up. That's how important.
So if someone's listening to this and they think they might want to be a warm up actor, or as an actor, warm up comic, what would it be called?
Warm up comic. Yeah.
Warm up comic. What is the average pay rate? Like if they were first time, like what's a straight out of college person kind of got to do to get, because it's a hard business to get into as well.
It's a hard business to get into because there's just very few people that do it. Very few. It's crazy because and now the good news is there's a little bit of a resurgence of shows coming back with audiences. So that's
Oh, that's
nice.
true too. There was no audiences for COVID for a
There were no
while.
audiences. The sitcoms essentially went away. They went
Yeah.
away. I mean, because most shows are now doing single cam. They're on Amazon, Hulu, all this stuff. But slowly now you see like Night Court is back. The Connors. There's so many shows now that are back. Tim Allen has a new show. So it varies. I mean, because if you're a warm up or want to get into it, the best thing you can do really is go watch shows. Go really watch, kind of see what people do. Uh, a lot of people are doing the same thing, but just with their own tone, their own spin to it, and kind of figure out where you fit into that, where you fit into shows. I mean, for me, the best thing I could recommend to somebody would be just network. I mean, I got a lot of shows. My first sitcom was from Steve Byrne because he had a sitcom called Sullivan and Son, and he brought me in on it. And I'd never done a sitcom before. And those are hard to do because they take 4 or 5 hours to film. I mean, they take a long time because there's so many starting and stopping points and rewriting and just moving cameras. But if you can get into that world, I mean, those shows, those are, $5,000 a night. I mean, they pay very, very well. It's crazy.
Okay, so let's say it's not a sitcom, it's a talk show. They usually do 2 a day, right?
2 a day. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and the money's a lot less because, you're basically daytime talk doesn't have as much money as a sitcom.
Right.
So you're looking at, I mean, like a sixth of that. I mean, it's very, the money is a lot lower, but the work is way more consistent. I mean,
Okay.
for a sitcom, you're taping 23 episodes a season. For something like Jennifer Hudson, we're taping 170 episodes a year, a season.
Right.
So the
Right.
work is, but listen, don't get me wrong. I mean, a sitcom is 1 day a week and then you're off for 6 days. Jennifer is 3 days a week, but it's definitely more stable. And here's the problem too, Kim, with a sitcom. Because a sitcom is only taping once a week, if that audience is bad when you leave,
Oh no, you have a
that
whole week.
that show has, well, you and the show has 6 days to think about what we can do to repair it. Should we go in a different direction? Should we bring in somebody else? I mean, I got lucky. That's how I got Ken Jeong's sitcom. Ken Jeong had a guy who was doing Dr. Ken, wasn't a fit for the show, and I got a call the next day to do it. So,
Do you have like a manager for this, or is it
no,
like how does this even work? Okay, so
it's
warm
all just,
ups. It's just word of
yeah,
mouth. Like
word of
so.
mouth.
So
No,
if you're a college student, go watch shows. Talk to the warm up person. Say you're interested in it. Could you come back again tomorrow? Watch them a bunch.
here's what and when I started, Roger, who helped me at the Late Late Show, who is now a dear, dear friend. We talk almost every other day. Um, Him and I kind of come from the same background. If somebody calls me and says, I want to get into warm up, I'm happy to, hey, let's go grab lunch. Let's whatever, because you're not going after the same jobs that I'm going after.
For
So
sure.
we're both, the new person is going after an infomercial or an MTV show that's going to take 10 hours to film, like a Jersey Shore reunion show or something like that. That's what they're like. If I got a call for that, I would say, hey, I'm not interested in making $100 for 10 hours, but I know maybe somebody who's newer that would be
Needs
willing to do
the
it.
resume builder. Yeah.
Yes. And that's,
So know that when you do start, you're not going to make more than like 100.
I mean, it's going to be very low unless I remember it was one of my favorite memories as a warm up. I remember I got hired. Pete Holmes had a late night show after Conan. It was on at like 11:35, and Pete did a show, and they tried warm ups, didn't work, and they brought me in. Didn't know Pete at the time, and Pete brought me backstage, and he said, "Hey, here's what I'm looking for. Here's what I need from a warm up guy." And I went out there, and just because I knew what to do, I'd done late night for so long.
Right.
And Pete calls me back after the show and he said, I'm sorry. He said, I had no idea that you were a pro. He said, I had just been working with guys that really didn't know what they were doing. And just to, again, I know it sounds silly, but like when a guest comes out and they sit for an interview and then they're leaving, you always give an outro. You all like, I know it sounds like very silly or just lame, but like it's those little things of working with the stage man. Like, there are those things that you need to learn. And so many comics just think I can just go out there and do 10 minutes of material and I walk away and collect a lot of money. It's not that at all.
Will you ever write a book on this?
There is a book that a guy named Bob Perlow wrote a book about it. He used to do warm up for the Tonight Show with Leno before Don Reed came in, and he moved back to, I think, Delaware or something. But he's got a book out, which is just great about just different audiences and different experiences and just the whole thing. I mean, it's a pretty unique job. I mean,
it's so niche.
It's a very niche job. I remember one time I was brought in, never forget, I was brought in to do, Gabriel Iglesias had a Netflix sitcom called Mr. Iglesias, and they brought me in. It was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. They brought me in, Kim, and I remember I knew it was going to be all rabid fans. I knew it. I was excited. Easy shooting fish in a barrel. And they wouldn't let fans in. It was all his family because it was the day before Thanksgiving. Oh. They were there just to be in town with him. And then he was sick that day. And I remember the audience being 180 of what I thought that they would be. They were so bad. I got a text from the producer during the show. This audience isn't good. And
they were worried for him being sick because it's like his mom.
He was sick. Like there was so much going on. And I was like, this just wasn't what I was expecting. It just wasn't. And that was hard. It was a hard.
How do you turn an audience like that?
Not much. I mean, there's really not much you can do because you know, they already know the drill. They've been there. They're friends with Gabriel. A lot of them are walking onto the stage right in front of you to grab food, bring it back to their seats. You know, you can't get them in trouble. I mean, what are you going to do? Not have them back? I mean, they're going to be always allowed back. So, you know, there is that issue. I mean, what do? You just got to smile. And, you know, I remember I did another show. It was a Matthew, what was it?
I love how much you name drop. Like, and I don't mean name drop in a bad way. Like, you're like, this person was not nice to me. And you'll say who that person is.
I will tell you.
I love that.
Like for the years that I did warm up, yeah, Craig Ferguson, not good to me. And then I worked on Dr. Phil and another guy that I would never work for because just not. I got a job at Dr. Phil doing warm up, and you're like, how did that guy have it's a daytime talk show that's very serious. It's not, you know, celebrity driven. It's very human interest driven. Right. And I got the job.
But then he fights with people, right, on that show?
He fights with people. But I remember always hearing bad things about the vibe of that show and not being good. And I got that job in September of 2020 when COVID was going on. And they said, you're going to do warm up for the TV monitors. That's his audience, TV monitors that are behind him on set. A lot of shows. Remember when shows did that?
Yeah, what a nightmare.
Audience joining them. So I remember the pay was brutal. It was like whatever the money was, $100, whatever it was. But I needed a job and I wanted to get out of the house. They said, you're going to do 6 minutes. He's going to come out. You're done. Perfect. 6 minutes turned into 10, turned into 15, turned into 25. And I remember saying to the producers, guys, this is nonsense. Like, I mean, we agreed that I was going to do 5 minutes, which is why I agreed to the rate being so low. And they said to me, there's nothing we can do. And I said, I'm leaving. I'm done. Like, this is nonsense. And I think they were surprised because it was COVID and people needed work. But I was like, I'm not going to be treated this poorly on a show that I don't care about. I don't. And so I remember quitting. And I'll never forget this, Kim. I was so proud of myself. I ended up going to SAG-AFTRA, the union that protects employees from money and workplace stuff. And I said, this is a SAG-AFTRA show, right? And they said, yeah. And I said, gotta be honest with you guys, I don't think I was getting SAG-AFTRA money, which has
so warm-ups are under the SAG-AFTRA.
Correct.
Good to know.
Unless it's a non-union like MTV show or whatever it's right. But most are. So I said, I gotta be honest with you guys, like this is just ridiculous. It was, you know, and now I knew I could fight for it because I was gone. And they said, let us look into it. And they looked into it and they realized I was shorted for 12 shows or how many ever shows that I did. And the Dr. Phil show had to cut me a check for a couple grand. And I'll never forget, I knew that their ass had to be burned, like that they were cutting.
They're mad about it. Yeah, because they were probably really watching the budget.
Of course. Yeah.
But Dr. Phil wasn't directly rude to you then. It was just the overall
Well, no, the show was bad because of the vibe he sets. I mean,
Got it.
that's, whenever you're on a show and it's a bad vibe, it's because of the host.
Do you
I mean,
feel that like Adam Ray, right? How he
of
does the
course,
Dr. Phil
yeah.
stuff? What do you think of that though? Like, have you ever told him like, hey, you're making him too nice?
It's
Like
by the way,
whatever it is.
I do warm up for those Adam Ray shows.
Oh, okay. So then this is like full
Yes.
circle of fun.
So it's so funny that you say that. I do warm up for the Dr. Phil shows that Adam does, sometimes on the road, but mostly at the Comedy Store. And Adam knows how I feel about him because we talked about him as Adam was putting the whole
Together.
Dr. Phil concept together. So there's a comic out there that does, it's very popular. It's huge right now. So
Yeah.
I remember the day
And he
Adam
never even asked Dr. Phil. He just started doing it, which is
started doing
also
it.
hilarious.
So I remember the day that Adam texted me and he said, "Hey, the real Dr. Phil is going to be at the Comedy Store tonight.
Oh yeah.
So do me a favor and just keep it low profile." And I said, "Of course." And I remember Dr. Phil came into the green room and I didn't say two words to him because I felt like I never met him when I was working on his show, which is
Got it.
insane, right? Anybody that I've ever worked for, you always meet them before the show starts. Hey, this is even Craig Kilborn. Like, hey, this is the warm-up guy. You're going to be seeing them up in the audience the entire show. We want you to know who they are. They always welcome you. Even Jennifer, the end of every show, gives me a shout out. How about a hand for Gary? I had never, in those 2-3 weeks that I worked at Dr. Phil, had never even met him. Never. And to me,
maybe COVID though. Maybe I'm just trying to give.
No, because I remember going into the show and I remember saying to people that worked on the show, "Hey, how is it here?" And people would always say, "It's a job."
Oh,
Like
okay.
you would never hear that at Jennifer. Never.
Okay.
So when I saw him at the Comedy Store, and he's very frail looking now, but I remember I was like, I'd be a hypocrite if I went up to him and said, "Hey, I worked on your show. I liked it. Great." But I literally did my warm up and walked out because I was just like, I just don't. But and I also think him, and maybe I'm wrong, but knowing him and knowing the show, I don't know if he likes what Adam is doing as much as he's placating it. I
Oh,
always think
probably. That's for sure. He can't. The
he
problem
can't.
is it's so popular you can't. So long time ago, I did Kim Kardashian impression. It was terrible. But I was Kim Kardashian and I interviewed actual famous people as Kim Kardashian, but more of like not what Kim Kardashian is now, nothing like that, but like just a dumb chick who has too much money kind of thing. Is
Okay.
basically what this thumbs up thing always pops up when it's the worst. So I was doing that and I found out Kim Kardashian had heard about it.
Yeah.
And her whole thing was that she just never posted or helped it because she probably didn't like it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
because it wasn't a flattering impression of her. What was interesting for me was when I was her, the guests that would come on before they would tell me, they'd be like, I really don't like her, so I'm going to use this as therapy. And they would like be so mean to me. I was just like, whoa, this is crazy. And then others like loved her and were like, oh, I'm so excited. But it was just a really weird thing.
Well, I do feel that way about the Dr. Phil thing because he's really kind of making Dr. Phil kind of a goof, right?
Yeah.
And so
he's taking away his
And I find it hard to believe that Dr. Phil would be like, and by the way, listen, Dr. Phil knows how powerful Adam's show has been and how many viewers it's getting. So why wouldn't he go on and just kind of promote himself as being this, oh shucks, this is funny, a good guy thing. I don't know this to be fact or not fact, but I just know that my guess is I don't know if he likes it.
I heard Dr. Phil said to Adam, what's it like to finally be famous off of being me?
Funny.
Like not being yourself. Like a stab, but like a, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like a little bit of a backhanded compliment.
Because look at how that show, I mean, it's killing. I mean, it's
great.
It sells out everything, not only here in LA, but in advance, 3 months out. And I mean, the show's great and Adam's getting great guests and he's so good at it. But yeah, I don't think that Dr. Phil is really enjoying it. And the problem I had with the Dr. Phil show, and you could see it, he was very much selling his own agenda. Like, hey, my wife has these products out. I have this doctor on demand, and it's all like pushing his own nonsense. And I understand every show's got to do something like that to just cross advertise, whether it's the host holding up a Pepsi can, whatever. But it was so literally pushed down your throat. I don't know. Those were though. I've had so many great memories of doing shows, but Ferguson and uh, Dr. Phil were two of the worst experiences. And listen, I will say there are days like even a Masked Singer where that show is taking 7 hours to film, and
I've
it's
heard
a
a lot of
long day.
negativity about that show personally,
Well, it's funny that you say that because I
but
like
I've
it.
never been there. I've never, yeah.
That's one of those shows. The only reason I keep going back is because it is a good vibe, despite long days and just craziness. Everybody is super nice, so
That's
that is
good.
why. Like, and that's also a show too. Like, if an audience might not be that great, they'll say to me, but in a very positive way, "Hey, what could we have done as a production to help you make them better?" Which to me, that is a huge sign of growth and just matureness that they're like, hey, what can we do? What do you need from us so your job is easier?
Have you
Which,
ever done a show where like you're working with the audience and then whoever the guest is on the show is like insane or something traumatic happens and then you have to like rein back in the audience, or it's good for TV because it's dramatic?
that's interesting. Well, I remember a buddy of mine, not my story, but a buddy of mine's story. He worked on The View. His name was Tom Kelly, and he was there the day that like Rosie O'Donnell just quit and was basically telling off like Elizabeth Hasselbeck, and like nobody was expecting that. And then they go to
Right.
commercial break, and he's like, "Hey, who wants a View T-shirt?" Like that happens. Well, yeah, I got one actually. I remember. There was a guy, a basketball player that was on Last Call with Carson Daly, and middle of the interview, he just left and just started calling Carson some weird things and just took off and just it was a very weird thing. And he leaves. Carson goes behind him. A very weird thing that, and again, you don't know what's going on. Why did this
Right.
happen? What's the meat of this story? But just literally walked off the show, and you're like, huh, this is bizarre that this, by the way, another crazy story, Kim. I always bring people down to dance because obviously daytime is all about
It's
dancing and
fun.
having
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, yeah.
And literally, we're in a commercial break. I bring down a couple people. There's an older guy. He's walking down. He seems a little frail. And I'm kind of like, oh, this maybe wasn't a good thing. He starts dancing. The audience loves it, going nuts. This guy's so funny. He falls backwards, hits his head. And all of a sudden, like in slow motion, the show stops.
Of course.
And you're like, oh my God. And then Jennifer comes over, and everybody's kind of like, hey, we need a medic. And I remember saying to the guy, just to lighten the mood, I said, hey, if you're hurt badly, tell them that you were at the Wheel of Fortune. And it gets a big laugh. It just kind of eases the tension a
Yeah.
little bit. But I think in those moments, you just don't know what to do. I mean, I remember one time when I first started working at the Late Late Show with first started working at the Late Late Show with Craig Kilborn. I was kind of still on a trial basis, and to kill time, I would have people run from the audience down to the floor, and I'd play the Price is Right music.
Oh, fun.
And I remember my buddy Roger, who was a seasoned warm-up guy, said, "Don't do that. Somebody's going to get
Get
hurt."
hurt.
Yep.
Oh,
And Kim, I was like, "Nope, I know what I'm doing. Listen,
it's
old man,
America. People can't
this is
run
people
here.
want
You
people
can't.
people want this." And I remember I did it like a day in, and a guy hit from the bottom stair to the floor wrong and twisted his leg. And I remember he's like, could you guys, I need to see somebody. And I just remember like, they're going to get rid of me. Like this is,
Yeah, because it's expensive. Now they have to pay that medical bill.
well, I've also seen this too. I saw this at Conan once where I did a dance contest with like 10 people. Lady falls. She goes back to her seat. No, I'm okay. I'm okay. 2 days later, the show will call me and, hey, do you remember that woman?
Yeah.
Exactly it. I was like, that woman, what are you talking? And oh yeah. She's now suing the show. I was like, she was fine. Like,
Yeah.
what? But then they start getting people in their head.
Their
Of them
friends are like, what do you mean you didn't sue?
at Warner Brothers. That's a Conan show. Like, come on. So
Well, you were at the Improv on the 60th
yeah.
anniversary thing. I don't know. I think we all were drinking. I was drinking, and a woman, I don't know if you were there when she passed out and hit her head in front of the building.
No.
Oh, this elderly woman went into like a seizure, and I was talking to Ryan Clark, and I was drinking a beer, and I go, hey, I witnessed it from this corner of my eye because it was outside, and I passed my beer to Ryan. I go, hold my beer, and then I went, and me and this other woman resuscitated this woman back to life. And I was like in my head, like, I'm drunk. I should not be doing this. But two, no one else was going to do it. Like, we genuinely checked for other people, and if we hadn't, the ambulance got there. She was okay. We did the right thing. It saved her. She's not mad. It was all great. It was just one of those like really funny improv stories. And then at the improv afterwards, the manager who was running the event came over and was like, hey, we should have you here more. And I was like, yeah. You should give me more time here because I'll save the audience because I have my little.
I love it that it's not, hey,
congratulations.
As a comic, we love you, but we love you giving CPR to our customers even more. So this is why you should keep working here.
I also got a free bag, everybody. Don't worry. No, the improv is great. I love the improv. They put me up a lot. I really do love them. And he was being funny. I guess I was being funny too. Go ahead.
I also don't, kind of as I get older, because I always go there, and you and I have had drinks at the bar many times, but I also have to be careful because as I get older, it's why I kind of avoid a lot of those social settings with like the holiday party, because I'm like, I'm going to drink way too much. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say something inappropriate. I'm going to wake up the next day. Who did I say? Like, I try to avoid.
I try to leave, but when I feel myself getting into that space, I just Houdini out because I know.
Yes.
You're just talking shit. You're just having fun. And I guess when this woman was going down, the reason that they were making fun of me was because I was telling jokes the whole time, but I didn't realize it. And they were like, wow, you're like really funny. And I was like, this, because the ambulance came and then he put his glove on, and then he put his hand on top of like one of those poles outside. And I was like, why would you even put your glove on? Like, what are you doing? You're right. I know the people who come up and down here. It's way more infected. Like you're going to need to know.
It is. It's that crazy thing. It's like, I mean, you see that, in those audiences all the time where it's just like, I remember a buddy of ours, Amir K, got into it. Like people wouldn't stop, and it was the end of the show. And just, I mean, again,
did he do warm up, or you're just talking regular stand up?
Kind of a weird comic side note. But I guess the difference between doing it for a studio audience and the improv is that at least a studio audience, when I'm doing it, is sober. I mean, you'd like to think so.
Very true. Very, very true.
Think that they weren't getting drunk before the show. I remember I had a guest one time.
I'm sure somebody has come drunk though.
Well, I remember one time at a show, I invited a buddy of mine to Conan, and he was wearing a trench coat. I was like, that's kind of odd, right? It's like not even that cold out.
It's already 90s bad.
Already 90s.
Flasher. It's already scary.
Up to me at the end of the show, and he's high. He's so messed up. And I was like, how did he get this bad? And then I realized, he was probably doing gummies or something like that. Yeah. Show. And then the problem becomes, and I've seen this a lot at warm-up gigs, people are like, hey, where is JP Buck? He books the comics for this show. I'd love to say hello to him. I'm like, guys, this isn't the time or the place. Like, he's not here just sitting at a table waiting for submissions. Like, he's working. Like, this is not,
Right, and you probably just Googled it. You're not actually friends with him.
You're not friends with him. Everybody would be like, hey, can I get a picture with Conan? I was like, I can barely get pictures with my family. Like, I want to fly as far under the radar as possible. Because I remember, Kim, I had a buddy of mine when I first started working at Conan, and it was my dream gig because I've been a fan of Conan. It was a great paying gig. I did 10 minutes. I didn't have to stay for the show. Did the warm-up, was out the door during the monologue, was walking back to my car. And I had a buddy of mine that came to the show, and Snoop Dogg came backstage and was literally walking in our direction. And my buddy said, can I get a picture? And that's the number one rule. Don't do that. And his producer that I didn't particularly care for just started going nuts on me. Like, why would you do that? This is blah, 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 blah. And I understood it.
Right.
And I literally was talked to the next day by the executive producer, but just said, hey, don't do that again.
Well, Snoop Dogg specifically. So I have personally pushed Snoop Dogg by mistake. I was dancing for Puff Daddy. I know we're not getting into that.
Okay.
So it was a live show and we had to get back on stage as dancers. And Snoop Dogg was in our door to where we need to change, like where the girls' dressing room was.
Yeah.
And I didn't look up. I just knew I had 30 seconds to change this outfit, right? So it's like, run, get changed. And I pushed him out of the way. And I then got like a grabbing on my back because it was like his security. And I look up and I was like, Snoop Dogg. I gotta go. And I just kept running and changing. I got back on stage fine, but it was just one of
That's
those.
hilarious.
I was like, oh no, I pushed Snoop Dogg.
Well, I was just like, this guy is going to cost me this amazing gig.
Right? Yeah.
He's gonna ruin it because he wanted a picture with Snoop Dogg, and I was just like, I was so upset, and I was just like, why would you do that? But then everything worked out. And it showed you kind of the classiness of Conan and the show of like, hey, just don't do that again. It's just not, they're here. They don't want to.
Well, and friends, don't use your friends negatively. Like, no certain things shouldn't have to be said.
Right. 100%. Right.
And if you want to do something with somebody else that's not your friend, but your friend brought you there, maybe check in with your friend first. Like, hey, is it cool if I do this?
100%. Absolutely.
Because they might say, sure, that person never bothers, or they might say, don't do it. I'll lose my job.
I also had people who would see Conan like walking by as we were leaving, wouldn't say anything, just knew the protocol, knew not to say anything. I mean, that's just what you do. I mean, it's how it works. So, but some people just don't know. And I'll never forget. I said to Conan's assistant one time, I said, hey, I have some friends here. It's my niece and her dad, or my niece and her uncle, whatever. And they didn't know that I had said that. And Conan came out and said, oh, how is Gary as an uncle? And the girl was like, what are you talking about? Like, it was very funny, but I had to set it up that way to make it look like my family's here. Would you say hello to them rather than just two oddballs? So he came out, and it was just a weird, awkward, like, oh, hey, but I didn't know. And then he was kind of thrown off, but it was just kind of funny.
Yeah, because she's just a kid.
Yes. But I will say now the good news with warm up is that things are slowly kind of getting back, and there's more sitcoms. And, think about it. There's not, now that the talk is gone, what's left in daytime that's filming here in LA? Jennifer Hudson. What's left in terms of like late night? Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, there's more sitcoms that tape in LA more than anything else.
A lot of it's going to Canada right now, Vancouver.
Well, there was talk that The Masked Singer would move there because it's cheaper and all that other good stuff. So, we'll see. I think it's a good time. And again, getting back to that original point, Kim, I think if somebody wants to get into it, right, go and so many people will or won't do it just based on how much they want to do it. But since there's no roadmap of how to do it, just go and see shows, see how other people do it, network around. I mean, that's really that's kind of how I got it. And, if you're a comic and a lot of people, so many comics are getting their own show or their own specials, do warm up for those things.
Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh my God, Kim. Well, I'm always excited when I see you at the clubs and just in general. And, I'm a fan, and I was so excited that I got to do warm up for your special. And it's so much fun when we run into each other and drink.
You're hilarious. So where can people find you if they want to come watch you live?
They can go to my website, GaryCannon.com, and that has the link to all the socials. And then if they ever want to come to a taping of the Jennifer Hudson show, the link for that show is iota.com. We tape through, I think, end of April. So, yeah.
Yeah, go and get free candy.
Free.
I'm assuming you get free candy.
No, we don't on that show. No.
Oh, no. Okay, go and be no candy. Sorry, guys.
We do give T-shirts, though, so there you go.
Okay, you'll be skinny for the shirt. That's good.
There's all that. Absolutely.
Sugar is bad. All right. Well, everyone have a safe week. I'm Kim. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.